Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 2nd of June, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today is Ben Rubin. Welcome to the programme, Ben.
Thanks, Mike.
And by video link, we're joined by Diane, Rasmussen, McAdie. Now, later in the programme, I'm going to be reporting on Ukraine and what's been happening there over the weekend and in Russia, and of more on water and energy requirements for the AI infrastructure that Starmer's wanting to roll out. Ben's going to be talking a little bit about, well, in fact, it's quite a big report on Palantir and Trump. And also later on in the programme on Stand Up to Racism event that you attended recently. And Diane's going to have an update on the campaign for justice by the women sent as children to Fornethy House in Glasgow. But we'll begin today with the Strategic Defence Review, which Starmer says is going to put Britain on a war footing. He has launched the Strategic Defence Review today at a visit to BAE Systems, which puts, as I say, the UK on a war footing. As reported last week, the SDR was externally led, in inverted commas, by Lord Robertson, a former Labour Defence Secretary and Secretary General of NATO, a former Secretary General of NATO. Now, Robertson has apparently made 62 recommendations in the review, and they are all going to be accepted in full because the UK armed forces need to, quote, move to warfighting readiness to deter Russia. Do you think Russia will feel deterred by anything that Britain does at this point?
I'm going to say no.
No, it's as simple as that. Well, look, following on from the announcement of the kill web, which we were reporting on Friday, Secretary of State for War John Healey and Keir Starmer made a couple of other announcements this morning. First is the one on screen at the moment, that the UK will build up to 12 attack submarines as part of the AUKUS programme. Now, it's not clear at this point how many of these submarines are going to Australia, but certainly some of them will be there to replace our ageing attack submarine fleet as it exists at the moment. Now, these are nuclear-powered, conventionally armed submarines for the purpose of hunting and killing conventionally armed and nuclear-armed Russian submarines. And, well, this is hilarious, or maybe not, actually, because these new submarines, as I say, not clear exactly how many will go to Australia, but certainly some of them will replace the current fleet of nuclear-powered, conventionally armed attack submarines that Britain has. But there is no retirement plan in place for the old ones. In fact, about a dozen of the previous generation, which were retired over the course of the last 45 years, are rotting in a pond at Devonport Dockyard here in Plymouth, and there are several more up in Rosyth in Scotland. The Scottish submarines, and several of those in Plymouth, have been defueled already, but 8 in Plymouth have not. And as you saw from that headline, in fact, there have been a couple of leaks from those submarines over the last few years. The process of defueling them has now been halted. So the question is, are they going to add the currently deployed submarines to that grouping as they're retired from active service? That time will tell on that. Now, also announced this morning is securing the future of the Royal Navy's continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent, backed by £15 billion investment into the Sovereign Warhead programme in this Parliament, and that was their words. This is also fairly hilarious because even if these work, the delivery system doesn't, and that's been demonstrated a couple of times now, as the BBC has reported here in the past. And there doesn't seem to be any announcement about the delivery system itself, and perhaps that's because Britain has little or no control of that, since Trident belongs to the United States, effectively. So it seems to me that the danger is that as the UK moves onto this war footing, more and more people are going to be reliant on that for their livelihoods, because Starmer is using this also as a jobs programme, as we can see from this graphic that they pushed out this morning. And although they're saying here procurement of up to 7,000 UK-built long-range weapons, £1.5 billion investment to build 6 munition and energetics factories, work will create more than 1,000 new jobs and support a further 800 across the UK. That's only one of the announcements. They're talking about tens of thousands of jobs in the British defence warfare industry in the coming years. So anyway, the Strategic Defence Review will be released today. We'll read it carefully and report more on that in the coming on Wednesday and Friday, I've no doubt. What are your thoughts, Ben? The prospect of people's incomes and jobs reliant on the continuation and the building of this war rhetoric is pretty dangerous.
I'd say it's extremely dangerous, and it's not just happening in the defence industry. If you listen to what they're describing as taking place in this huge industrial transition, the green transition, they use this term "good green jobs" all the time, right? And essentially, that's people working for the state. Yeah, so this is the slow and probably increasingly accelerating destruction of traditional industries and the private sector, and then that being replaced with everyone being reliant on these jobs that come from the government. If you're reliant on the government for your income, that means that you can't criticise the government. That's not a good place for us to be, given what we've seen them doing on a consistent basis over the past, I don't know how long, several decades, century, certainly the past few years.
Absolutely. And not just you can't speak out, but of course you're much more likely to be for the war program, for the war policy.
Absolutely, yes. Your livelihood is on it. Your interests align with the people running the system. Ultimately, it's bad enough as it is now. I mean, just look at the way that the NHS behaves on a daily basis, and you apply that to all the other different component parts of the system. Then, we're in big trouble. But ultimately, that's what they've been talking about doing, right? They have this term mission-led government, and they want to align the entire nation around these missions. And they've got 5 of them, right? One of them's about green energy. There's a bunch of others that I can't reel off the top of my head. But this is about aligning the entire nation, government, market, the population, all of it around these shared objectives that are being dictated from the centre. Yeah, it's a fundamental transformation of the country. You no longer live in a free country at that point. Everything's being dictated by the system.
Absolutely. Now, Ben, all the world's a stage, and some of the actors on that stage might include Trump, Palantir, Israel. What's the connection between all of these?
Yes, well, I mean, they say the world's a stage, the leaders are puppets. The question is, who is pulling the strings and writing the script behind the scenes? And I'm going to talk about Trump, but this is just as true in the UK, Europe, and elsewhere, right? But the big plot twist for me, one of the real kickers, actually, because, I wasn't... I didn't mind Trump won. First term, I didn't think he was too bad, to be honest with you. I didn't disagree with everything that he was doing. But then straight out the gate in his second term, you had the announcement of Project Stargate. On day one of the new administration, he had Sam Altman from OpenAI, Massasan from SoftBank, Larry Ellison from Oracle into the White House to announce for $500 billion to build AI data centers across the whole US, which is basically his mass surveillance and genetic engineering operation. I mean, literally, this is hellish, actually. You couldn't imagine anything worse. And as if that could possibly be strategic priority number one for any kind of sane administration. It makes absolutely no sense. And the madness has only increased over the weekend. And this is what prompted me to talk about this today, because they just announced that Palantir, this is from the New York Times, have been tapped by Trump to compile data on Americans. The Trump administration, it says there in the subline, has expanded Palantir's work with the government, spreading the company's technology, which could easily merge data on Americans throughout all of the government agencies. They say could easily merge. It's been designed specifically to merge that data, right? It's the reason that it exists. There's no other purpose for this contract to have been put in place. And it's in clear violation of all basic constitutional rights relating to privacy, free speech, national security, whatever you care to mention. And this is coming directly from Trump, right? So this relates to an executive order that was issued on March the 20th about stopping waste, fraud and abuse by eliminating information silos, breaking down barriers between government departments. This was apparently, according to the exec order, about eliminating bureaucratic duplication and inefficiency while enhancing the government's ability to detect overpayments and fraud. Interestingly, it does not include the executive office of the president. Can't imagine why that would be.
But isn't Britain also detecting overpayments and fraud? So are we seeing the same policy on both sides of the Atlantic once again?
Well, I mean, you could probably apply that to any government anywhere, right? But this drive towards digitisation of everything under the guise of efficiency is that's essentially the Trojan horse that's being used in order to bring in this AI-enabled data platform that's going to centralise knowledge and understanding of populations ultimately, so that can then be weaponised against us. That's what this is all about ultimately. And it's being built in this instance, the Palantir instance, by this guy. Let's have a little listen to Alex Karp.
Look, we built PG, which single-handedly stopped the rise of the far right in Europe. We built Foundry, which was used to distribute the COVID vaccine and saved millions of lives globally. We built what we call multi-constellation, and what's often called the digital kill chain. And they're category-defining products. So when you deliver these products to the market, just honestly, people say this isn't going to exist, this isn't valuable, but then it changes the market. And then the market is the Palantir market. Now, that doesn't mean everyone in the world is going to buy our product, but it means most of the sensible people in the world are going to buy from the category we defined.
So that's Alex Karp, the founder, chief executive, chief architect, main spokesperson for Palantir. Lovely guy, obviously, you can tell. And let's not forget that Palantir was established with backing from InQtel, which is a CIA venture capital fund, closely linked into Unit 8200, and essentially operates like an IDF unit, right, as we'll get into a bit more as we go along. And he's basically there bragging about the fact that his technology has been used to, one, single-handedly stop the rise of the far right in Europe, what he describes as the far right. So that's narrative suppression and misdirection. Two, he describes an entity or a platform called Foundry, which was used to drive the COVID vaccination program. He claims that that saved millions of lives. I'm going to say that I respectfully disagree with that, Alex Karp, probably quite the opposite. And importantly, he's talking about the US there, but actually that Foundry product sits right at the heart of the NHS IT stack, right? That's basically what is running the UK health system today. Same technology, same people, right? And entertainingly, or maybe slightly terrifyingly, the third point he mentioned in the context of the NHS is the digital kill chain. Right, so this is the cyber and meat space target selection to fight terrorism and protect democracy. And this is essentially exactly what you were talking about on Friday, Mike, right? This is the kill web, the kill chain. It's the same principle.
Right.
Yeah. Lovely people.
Absolutely.
Big friends with Zelensky. Okay, so and big supplier to Ukraine, and maybe this is why the war hasn't ended yet. Trump was boasting about the fact that he could shut this thing down in 24 hours, but apparently his friends at Palantir and elsewhere in the military-industrial complex are making far too much money for that to actually happen. And let's not forget, of course, that the other co-founder, in fact, there were three, but we'll just focus on Karp and Peter Thiel today, right? Is the other guy circulating in the background who's a multi-billionaire, one of the first external investors in Facebook, part of the PayPal mafia, big-time funder for Trump, essentially got him elected in his first and second terms, I think you could say, arguably. And both of those fellas, they're on the steering group of the Bilderberg meetings, right? So they're actually part of this elite clique who are pulling the strings at the top level of global governance, yeah, and dictating terms to the rest of humanity. And they appear to be pulling Trump's strings, certainly, and I'm almost certainly sure that it's going further afield too. All right, so that's the kind of institutional architecture that we've just looked at there. But there's also stuff going on the kind of the dark web, the seedy underbelly of the internet that I think is extremely interesting. And actually, when you follow the trail, it seems to be going back to the same place, right? So this is going to relate to 4chan. This is an anonymous messaging board, the supposed Wild West of the internet. It's where if you ever see screen grabs of messages that look a little bit like this and have got, these kind of memes, the soy jacks, Pepe memes, that kind of stuff generally comes from 4chan. And this site, which again is supposedly completely independent and anonymous, and the source of dissent and free thinking, got hacked back in mid-April. And it turns out that actually it's probably a Mossad operation, right? So we'll provide a link to this article. You can go and take a look. This is all over the internet. You can do your own searching, your own research into it. Just to read from the article on the Intel drop by Gordon Duff, basically says, 4chan hacked, Mossad exposed, the digital honeypot that created QAnon and poisoned the American right. He says, it's happened again. Another mask has slipped. And beneath underneath it, the machinery of manipulation has been exposed. 4chan, long celebrated or feared as the digital crucible of unfiltered thought, weaponized irony, and anonymous dissent, has just been revealed for what it truly is: a covert Israeli and American intelligence honeypot, psychological operations portal, and propaganda weapon. Fascinating, isn't it, how all these things end up going back to the same place? So it was hacked. This is a artist reconstruction. I don't know if this is actually real footage of the hacker, but I think it looks kind of cool. Mike's laughing anyway. And essentially they did it in true hacking fashion. They exploited the security vulnerability in the website's back-end code. And I'm not going to say any more than that because I will get shut down by our CTO, who is sitting directly to my left. But I'll put a link to, there's a video which gives a bit more of a breakdown of what they actually did. So you can go and have a look at that over on YouTube. Few things of note, right? The first one is that they were actually, although it was supposedly, 4chan is supposedly an anonymous site, they were aggressively fingerprinting browser information to establish who users were through alternative means, right? So although you were supposed to be anonymous, actually they were really putting a lot of effort into trying to find out who you were. Also, it turns out that a bunch of the moderators, what they call janitors, were based in Israel and had links to the Israeli state and intelligence agencies. And crucially, this is kind of hilarious, despite being about 0.12% of the world's population, Israel accounted for almost 50% of all 4chan posts. So about 226 million posts on 4chan came from Israel, right? And that means that this digital crucible of alt-right politics, the home of the Q movement and supposedly anonymous dissent in the US and the UK over the past 10 to 15 years, was basically an Israeli psyop. Right, that's what we're looking at here. And it's probably not that surprising, given that Mossad have been openly bragging about the fact that they run the world in recent months. Have a listen.
We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. And the world is our stage.
Okay. Well, couldn't get clearer than that, really, could you? So that was
just to clarify, that was from 60 Minutes.
That was from 60 Minutes, exactly. Yeah. So it's a 60 Minutes episode which came out the back end of last year. We'll put a link to it. You should go and watch the whole thing. It's 13 minutes 33 seconds long, interestingly enough, and it basically describes the Mossad operation against Hezbollah, where they blew up a load of pages and took out, I think, 32 people killed, 3,000 injured, 200 critically injured, a lot of people blinded, losing limbs, lots of collateral damage. Essentially, it was a terror operation, right? I mean, that's the way that I would interpret that. I think it certainly goes against the kind of rules of conflict. And, obviously Netanyahu celebrated this by giving Trump a golden pager. And Trump called it a beautiful operation because that's exactly the kind of thing that he likes about the Israelis. Interesting couple of tidbits just to close off here. If you go to the video, I'll again provide a link to this. This was a YouTube video talking about the takedown of 4chan. YouTube translate Mossad got wrecked, which is like shorthand for we wrecked something, we destroyed it. Google translates that as Mossad really good.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then finally, the links between Israel and Ukraine, as we talked about with Vanessa and David Miller last week, really come to the surface because Mossad have actually been celebrating the drone operation that happened over the weekend on Twitter. And I would say that these are two united forces by the looks of it.
I think there's increasing evidence for exactly that. Thank you, Ben, for that. Very interesting. Now, Diane, let me welcome you to the program. And UK Column been covering child abuse cases for many, many years. The issue of Fornethy residential school in Glasgow has been one we've been covering for quite some time. What's the latest?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Hello, Ben. It's great to be here today to talk about this. I have an update, and I've had several updates that I've kind of been saving up the last several months just because it's been a very slow process, as it always is. But the most recent update that I want to share, and then I'll work back from there, is that there will be a hearing on their petition in the chamber at Scottish Parliament on the 12th of June. We do have a new page on the UK Column website that shows all of the coverage that we've been doing over time, basically starting going back to 2022 and continuing to this day in 2025. So there's been conferences, there's been interviews, there's been written articles, news segments, by several of us on the team. But this is something that I've taken on myself and have been working on for a number of years. So the petition that is finally going to be heard after a very long time, again 3 years in the making, is on the Scottish Parliament website. Allow the Fornethy survivors to access Scotland's redress scheme. And at the center of what's been happening and the problem is that they were saying that even though they're not denying that there was terrible abuse that happened at Fornethy Residential School, which is in a very remote area of Scotland. So they would take these girls from Glasgow and take them out into this old house in the middle of nowhere, and all kinds of things that we can't even really speak about happened to them. So the problem is that they're saying that they don't qualify for the redress scheme in Scotland under the Child Abuse Inquiry because they weren't abused for long enough. So they were only there for 6 weeks at a time, and that wasn't enough to be abused sexually, emotionally, physically, and otherwise to be able to access redress and justice. So that's what this petition is all about. As their appointed researcher on behalf of the Fornethy survivors, I submitted written evidence to the Parliament, to the Petitions Committee back in 2024. And this is what I was saying, is that basically there's 2 points that after hours and hours of going to archives in Glasgow and the National Records of Scotland and so on, is that basically the issue is that they're saying that they don't apply for the redress scheme because, first of all, the short amount of time, and also saying that it was some sort of a convalescent or a holiday home for these girls, which was not the case. The 2 main points is that, first of all, is governed by the Corporation of Glasgow or Strathclyde Regional Council at the time, and it was an official attendance at a residential school, and also the evidence that they were not under the care of their parents. They were taken away from the custody of their parents and put into the hands of the state when they were there, which meant that basically anything could happen and did happen to them. So my evidence has been central to getting it to this point, and I just have a clip here from a video that was from, I think, in early January. We first posted it with Lynn Sheeran and Brian Garish, where he's been interviewing several of these women. And Lynn has been my main contact now for this Fornethy case. And let's just play a short clip to hear what she had to say about what we have been able to do for them so far.
The information that the Scottish Government's independent got was nothing that we didn't already know. Diane did go and dig deeper for us, and she did find out a lot of things that was relevant for us. She had made up a piece that the committee actually read out. Diane, for us, I believe, was good. She did help us in a big way. She helped us to get in there to the committee, to get her point across to them. There was information that she found out, like Fornethy was run and by who. We knew that, but the deeper side, yeah, she more or less blew theirs out the water. The information that the independent got was all censored. Everything Diane got was there in black and white.
So one of the main things that this so-called independent researcher has done, and you can read my full article that's on the UK Column website that goes into more detail, that's showing the evidence of what was in the archives versus what the independent researcher said, and then therefore by default Scottish Government, because even though she was claimed to be independent, she was being paid by Shona Robinson, who was the Deputy First Minister and the Finance Minister at the time up in Scotland. So what happened was when Hamza Yousaf stepped down and there were new people put into place in the Scottish Parliament, we now have John Swinney and we now have Kate Forbes as First Minister and Deputy First Minister, respectively. The issue that's been happening, of course, is that they're continuing the same message. Back in August, Kate Forbes, who was then at that point Deputy First Minister, rejected a call from the MSPs, including the Petitions Committee, who are all in full support of the women, citing basically the independent report, which was not me, the actual independent researcher, but the one employed at the time by Scottish Government, saying that they had attended Fornethy House, which is actually incorrect. It was Fornethy Residential School, which is a major point in the case, primarily on a short-term basis for convalescence or recuperative holiday under arrangements involving their parent or guardian and another person. That is completely false. They were taken there, placed by the Education Committee at the time, and they were not convalescing. They were just sent there. So in September of 2024, we had a sort of an apology that was not a proper formal apology, but it was thrown out by Glasgow City Council because ultimately the Glasgow City Council has direct responsibility for everything that happened to the women when they were at Fornethy. So it's not really the Scottish government. They're responsible for the redress scheme, but it's actually Glasgow City Council's jurisdiction because it was the councils before them. And so they kind of put out an apology, but it wasn't the formal apology that the women were expecting. Unfortunately, they have not been able to get any further than that. Colin Smith, who's the MSP, who's been, along with Alex Cole-Hamilton and a few others who have been leading this case, especially Colin and Alex, have been saying we need to push this forward. So they're not on the petitions committee, but they do have the unanimous support of the petitions committee. So what Colin did back in November was he wrote up basically some information after the petitions committee eventually agreed that they would take it to this debate, which is happening soon. And it's really interesting to see what he had to read, because it was my evidence that he cited that said this was under the scheme of residential education run by Glasgow Corporation and later by Strathclyde Regional Council. And so therefore they should be eligible. And the only reason that they're not being eligible is because of the lies that are being told that they were there for convalescence, and the lies that they were being told that they were chosen there that their parents chose them to put there, and that they were there for a holiday, when actually they were unenrolled from their school in Glasgow and re-enrolled in Fornethy, where there was no education even taking place, which was another problem, where they're supposed to be having lessons and they had none. They were just being forced to do things that the staff were telling them to do. Also, one more important thing to announce is that there will be, there is a court case against one of the alleged abusers that will be taking place hopefully in the autumn. I think it's been scheduled for September, so we'll see if that's happened because they keep pushing it back. This woman is Patricia Robertson. She's now 76 years old, and she is to stand trial accused of historical abuse at this former residential school, facing a total of 26 charges that happened between 1967 and 1983. That is from the BBC. So let's just hope that we will get the support that we need when we are in Parliament on the 12th of June, and that the court case will actually proceed as planned, Mike.
Dan, thank you very much for that. And no doubt we'll talk a little bit more about this in extra, because this is an ongoing case which goes right to the heart, as they often do, to government in Scotland, but governments in general. Okay, thank you, Dan. If you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, support.ukcolumn.org is the place to go. You can make a donation there or join as a member. And if you do join as a member, we absolutely encourage you to do that. That helps us, but it also gives you access to UK Column News Extra. You could pick something up at the UK Column shop. And if you buy something from clivetocarl.com using the link on this page, we do get a small percentage of that order. And although it doesn't cost you any more than that, but if you can't do any of that, please do share the material you find on the UK Column website. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of that material in a second. There are share links on the pages for you to use for the main platforms, at least. Tonight, let's see, where are we starting? Tonight at 7 p.m., Jerem is speaking to William Ramsay about Aleister Crowley and his massive influence in Britain and the world, in fact. So join us at 7 p.m. for that. It looks like a massively interesting conversation. And Paul Atherton.
Yeah, tomorrow at 1 p.m, Paul Atherton, who is a fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts, talking about the meltdown that's happening at the RSA, the Royal Society of the Arts, on account of the new management and trustee board that have come in and are basically taking the institution to pieces.
And I'm just going to apologise for the typo on that. I've left an H off, so I believe. So,
sorry, Paul.
Sorry about that. Okay, thank you. And Diane, let's come on to some of the latest articles on the UK Column website.
Yeah, here we are as commissioning editor, and I will say this again to everyone. If there are any viewers who are out there who would like to submit a pitch for an article to me, you can send that to me directly at diane@ukcolumn.org. We're constantly looking for new content, and a lot of this comes from our members. And this is just some that have been published in the past few days. Some of them have been discussed by the news because some of these are by our presenters, including this one by Charles Mallet, The Steel Trap, talking about British steel. That's a really interesting and relevant and timely article. So if we can just go through a few of these pretty quickly, Mike. This one is a companion article to an interview that Brian did with Ross, who is a Christian in Cornwall. So there was a video interview with Ross, and we also decided to make it into a separate written article because he provided a lot of extra information about the pushback that they're doing, rightfully so, in Cornwall and the Christian churches there. The next one we have up here is the Blair Bush project in Syria that brought Al Qaeda to power. This one is very detailed. Sorry.
Sorry, Diane. Tell us more about it in 1 second. I just wanted to mention in passing that as a result of this article, Vanessa spoke to Diane Sayre in the United States over the weekend. It was an absolutely fantastic interview related to this article. So also go and listen to that. But sorry, I interrupted.
Oh no, that's really great to hear. This is a very good article, a lot of detail and some really excellent evidence. A great piece by Vanessa, and I hope it goes a long way in getting views. The next one we have is people's reactions to opposing trans ideology. This one is just kind of a comment or a sort of piece on Steve, who is also known as Edge of the Matrix on YouTube. And he's got some interesting stories that Sarah Newland was sharing and writing up. And she's been in close contact with Steve, talking about what happens when he goes out onto the streets and talks about, is trans real or not? Some both positive and negative reactions, as you might imagine, from people out in the cities, especially Manchester. The next one we have here is Schools in Wales, a hostile environment for teachers and learners. This is by Martin Edwards, who's a longtime contributor to UK Column. Some completely shocking evidence in this particular article about how both students and teachers are behaving in schools in Wales. And from what I've heard, Wales is not unique in this situation, but it is quite shocking to read it and look at the evidence that he's provided. And we've got one more here. This is by Hugh McCarthy, who I have interviewed previously, and he's written a series of articles. This one is called Remove or Rewrite the Current Government Guidance on Relationships and Sexuality Education. He is in Northern Ireland, and he is actively campaigning in Northern Ireland and up in Stormont, actually, to try to get this changed, especially considering the recent Supreme Court decision that says women are biological women, and that's the end of it, and saying that the current guidance that's being provided in schools, not just in Northern Ireland, but throughout the UK, now goes against that ruling by the Supreme Court. And one piece of evidence that I'm just going to highlight quickly from that article is particularly interesting from the UK government when this was created, this diversity guidance that says, it was created under Theresa May's administration. So this is not new, to show that they were doing this EDI strategy back from 2018, as early as that. So this idea of the trans ideology and all this being just under Labour in the past few years is actually not true, because this has been going on for quite a while.
Just another reminder of the Sounds Beautiful Festival coming up in June 26th to 29th in Wimborne and Dorset. And Diane, we object to the geoengineering experiments.
Yeah, just 21st of June, once again, some of our friends from UK Column, Sonia Poulton, Mark Devlin will be speaking. So get down to Hyde Park if you can.
And finally, in defense of libraries.
This is a talk that I will be doing on the 12th of June, unfortunately the same day as the Fornethy hearing in Scottish Parliament, but I will be at the University of Buckingham talking about why we need to save libraries and what's happening to them. The tickets are free, so please join us if you can.
Thank you, Dan. Now, let's move on to what's been going on with Ukraine and Russia. As everybody will know by now, yesterday, Ukraine carried out Operation Spiderweb, a drone attack on Russian military aircraft. The Ukrainian claim is that $7 billion of damage was done. The Ukrainian intelligence service, the SBU, also claims that the operation took 18 months to organize, with dozens of small drones smuggled into Russia and launched remotely from various locations across Russia. They're saying that they kept these things in the backs of vans, in sheds, and in forest and so on. They claim that they hit 40 of the 120 strategic bombers which Russia has. They say that there were 4 types of strategic bomber hit, and they are trying to claim that some are no longer in production, so that the Russians are going to have a difficult time to repair and replace them. Now, on the other hand, the Two Majors Telegram channel, which is a pro-Russian channel, reported that the Ukrainian campaign, which besides the drone attacks included blowing up railway tracks, continued in the evening when, quotes, the Russian defense military reported that 53 drones had been shot down. At night, fragments of downed drones caused damage and fires in private and apartment buildings in the Kursk region. That was according to the acting governor. And they went on to say that footage of nighttime arrivals in Lipetsk, Voronezh, and Ryazan regions is circulating. And they also published a statement from the Russian Defense Ministry saying that Russian air defenses had shot down 162 Ukrainian drones, including 57 over the Kursk region, 31 over Belgorod, and smaller numbers over several other regions. Now, as for Operation Spiderweb, as they're calling it itself, Zelensky called it a brilliant operation, which was, quotes, aimed exclusively at military targets, specifically the equipment used in strikes against Ukraine. And that was said during his nightly speech last night. The usual suspects then crawled out from under whatever rock they've been hiding to crow about the success. There's Boris Johnson, for example. And the question for me is, what now? So today was supposed to be a day of peace negotiations in Istanbul. Reports so far say that this meeting is going ahead and that Russia is going to present its peace memorandum, which Putin is said to have told Trump about during their telephone call a few weeks ago. There's no doubt that Russia is likely to retaliate for this. And the question then is how. The two majors Telegram channel said, quotes, the destruction of our nuclear weapons carriers is an attack on Russia's strategic defense, an attempt to reduce our nuclear power. And they went on to say Kiev must be destroyed as a demonstration. Well, the first part of that, at least, is pretty accurate. Now, the question is, will the Russians choose to use Oreshnik once again? This is their hypersonic missiles, which they demonstrated so effectively some time ago. And although this is being pumped up as a massive propaganda coup for Zelensky, for sure it was not Zelensky's plan, contrary to the mainstream narrative. Ukraine has needed the support of the UK and critically the USA from the beginning, really, and particularly for targeting. And the question then is, what risk does this operation require us to carry in Britain and in the United States and in the EU? I'm pretty sure that Britain would love to see some kind of response from Russia which targets the West. That would enable emergency powers to be invoked immediately. And we've got to remember, we had confirmation just a few days ago from at least one senior politician here in the UK that Ukraine is a proxy for so-called Western governments. Now, I know we showed this on Wednesday. I think it's important that we remind ourselves what Kemi Badenoch said in this comment to Sky News. Let's have a listen.
Earlier this week, the Prime Minister joined with Mr. Macron and Mr. Carney in criticising Israel. Mr. Netanyahu responded by accusing him of supporting murderers, rapists, and baby killers. Was the Israeli leader right to say that?
Well, I think the first thing to say on this issue is that if Hamas is praising your actions, you've probably done something wrong. What he has said, he sees
people need to know where you stand.
Yeah, but I've been very clear where I stand. Hamas is a terrorist group. They are not our friends.
I'm talking about what you think about the Israelis'
Yes, but it's all related. Who funds Hamas? Iran. An enemy of this country. An enemy of this country. Israel is fighting a proxy war on behalf of the UK, just like Ukraine is on behalf of the West of Western Europe against Russia.
Now, Ben, you haven't had a chance to comment on this, so it'd be interested in your thoughts on it. But I mean, that is a fairly clear statement. I know that many commentators, including ourselves, have been making this point for a very long time now, but we have not heard this kind of language from any kind of mainstream voice, whether it's the media or a politician or whatever. And no matter how badly hurting the Conservative Party is from the onslaught from Reform at the moment, the fact of the matter is they are the main opposition party in this country, and so therefore she is effectively the shadow Prime Minister.
Indeed, she is. Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly honest thing for her to say. You know, it was, and it didn't appear to be a slip. I mean, she didn't back off the statement at any point, and you know, I guess it just frankly, it makes it all the more difficult to understand what's actually going on at that upper level, because we get a lot of people saying, oh, well, it's Mossad in Israel who are behind everything. And then she's there saying, well, actually, they're fighting a proxy war for us, So, what is actually happening up there? It's incredibly difficult to say.
It is indeed. Well, look, let's move on to the question of narratives and so on.
Yes.
The fact checkers.
Yeah, maybe maybe Full Fact could help us out, actually. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wonder if they've actually had a look at this Kemi Badenoch thing. So, yes, we've spoke about them. I mean, I can't even count the amount of times that I've spoken about Full Fact, let alone UK column over the years. And I seem to remember saying the last time I did bring them up back in April that the first mention that I could find of Full Fact was in 2012, and that they'd only been established for about 3 months at that point. So they're old foes of ours or friends. I can never quite work it out. Anyway, they give us plenty to talk about. We spoke about this visit of Chris Morris, their new CEO, to the House of Lords back in April, talking about conspiracy theories in schools, and actually the fact that Full Fact and their proxies appear to be running Ofsted at the moment, which is quite extraordinary. And now they're actually being directly promoted by the BBC. We're going to play you a short clip of Martha Kearney, the Radio 4 presenter, describing how a young woman was almost tricked by conspiracy theorists who were trying to warn her against listening to the advice of her doctor. And I'm going to play you the second half of the clip.
That's when she was told about Full Fact. It's a fact-checking charity working to counter harmful misinformation. Its team of expert fact-checkers, which includes a doctor, analyses articles and claims published online, then offers a verdict on their truthfulness and credibility. Going on to the Full Fact website, Charlotte saw how widespread health misinformation and conspiracy theories are, and this led her to question the so-called advice she'd been offered on the forums. Now armed with the confidence she needed to make the right choices for her own health, Charlotte began to take the contraceptive pill she'd been prescribed. She says that after a few weeks, her symptoms did improve. There's so much false information online, and that's why the challenge for Full Fact is huge. Anything you can give will help Full Fact's expert team carry out more fact-checking work on big topics like health, education and climate change, so we can all be better informed and make better choices. To donate, just search online for BBC Radio 4 Appeal or call 0800 404 8144. That's 0800 404 8144. You can also write a cheque to Full Fact and send it to Free Post BBC Radio 4 Appeal. That's the whole address. Importantly, please mark the back of your envelope Full Fact. Thank you.
Sorry, was the BBC shilling for Full Fact there?
Yeah. They're actually fundraising for Full Fact, right? And, there used to be some suggestion that there was a separation of powers at play here, right? In this truth ecosystem that circulates around the BBC and Full Fact and the Trusted Media Initiative and Ofcom and all these different organisations. But they're directly funding what is supposedly an independent charity. And they're actually handling funds for them as well, physically handling funds, because she just said at the end there, you can send cheques to Radio 4 fundraiser, so that goes to the BBC, and then they will pass that on for them. And they're just a department at that point, aren't they?
Certainly, you would suggest that since the BBC is effectively the state media of this country,
yes,
that therefore the state is indirectly funding Full Fact or directly funding Full Fact, depending on your point of view. Yeah, very interesting.
Isn't it just? No, I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that as we go along. I wonder how much they raise out of that, actually. I wonder what a BBC Radio 4 recommendation gets you these days from the great British public.
Well, it's rare that the BBC will answer a freedom of information request, but maybe that one might work since it's not about editorial matters.
Yeah.
But Diane, since we're talking about this topic of reality and truth and trust and so on, we thought we might run through a few of the headlines that appeared in the mainstream press over the last few days and just see what we think of them. So take it away.
Yeah, thanks. I hope this will be a little bit of dark humor as well, but I think it exposes really well exactly what happens. This was from this first one I have. It's from the iPaper, and it was just a photo that I took when I saw this in the supermarkets over the weekend. You see in the smaller corner a very important point, which is that the UK could run out of drinking water in 10 years without new reservoirs. However, the bigger story is that the BBC is letting off the over 75s who fail to pay their TV license fee. So that's how I'm going to start off with this. If we go on to what I've been seeing on social media over the weekend, because I watch what sort of these so-called local papers, but they're not really local because they're all owned by the same big companies. Because we had some nice weather, apparently, in some parts of England over the weekend. I'm in the north, so maybe it was warmer down south. I'm not sure. But we were told because of this that households in England were told to keep their doors shut on Friday and Saturday. Households in England were also urged to put sheets on their windows on Saturday. So, Brian and Ben, did you put sheets on your windows? And if not, how are you still alive?
I'm Mike, by the way, just to remind you.
Oh, sorry, it's Monday.
Right. No, I didn't put any sheets up. Did you put any sheets up?
Well, I never leave my basement when I'm not at the column. So
that'd be your mother's basement, would it?
No comment.
Look, my question, Diane, is what temperature is required in order to require us to put sheets in our windows? And I'm presuming that the sheets are supposed to somehow block out the radiation, which is causing the warmth in the room.
Or the sun that they're supposedly trying to block out. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. But the next one kind of maybe gives us some clues. Because the UK households are now, this is from Birmingham Live, Leeds Live, all of the so-called lives that we see, probably Plymouth Live as well. UK households were warned to not dry clothes or towels in the garden. It says that experts, whoever those are, warn against drying clothes outside due to health reasons, because drying clothes outdoors could expose you and your family to certain elements that aren't in your laundry. So, Mike, what do you think those elements are? I don't know.
I don't know. Are they falling out of the sky or something?
Yeah, just chemtrails again, is it?
It must be. I mean, this is quite incredible. What planet are these people on? And my question would be, has anybody looked at the list of ingredients that's in the average packet of washing powder or liquid? Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's go on. This one is going back a bit to April, but it was circulating on Facebook over the weekend. It's from the BBC and other sources saying the same thing, that a train driver let passengers off for fresh air and then left without warning them. There was a complaint from a couple that were stranded at Swindon on the train from Paddington Station to Carmarthen, and apparently Great Western Railways apologized, but they were still stranded. So who knows what was going on there?
I won't make the obvious Swindon jokes at that point. Sorry for anybody that lives in Swindon, but anyway, okay. What's next?
So the next one is from the Express, which said that UK schools, quote, must stop serving sausage rolls and ham sandwiches, report warns. And if you follow it through, it references a report by the Food Foundation, which tells us that we all need to stop eating meat in general for climate change purposes so that we can save the planet, and so we can't enjoy a ham sandwich at lunch anymore. What else do we have? Oh, yes. The COVID jabs in Australia are still going on. It says that the Daily Mail Australia health experts are furious as the Aussies continue to avoid getting the COVID-19 vaccine. We have dropped the ball, according to the article. There's apparently a new variant known as NB181, first recorded on January 21st, and it is responsible for a sharp rise in cases. So they're furious at the citizens for starting to finally refuse these things. According to the Express, if you can't afford to feed yourself, you shouldn't have kids. So there's, all kinds of things going on there. I don't know why the kid is laying on the floor. Maybe they're really hungry. I don't know. What do you see there, Mike?
I don't know, but what I'm going to say about that is, what I'm going to say about all of this is, this is the kind of trash that people are being bombarded with at the moment, and is it any wonder that people are destabilized and feeling that the world is complete chaos? it's just a total psychological operation. And if anybody's sort of thinking that this segment is lightweight and flippant, in a sense it is, because in a sense we're making fun of this, but there's a very much stronger sense that this, in the sense of the effect that this is having on all of us.
Yeah, and I have just a little bit more to finish up with, including some of my own things. So this was published in the Telegraph on the 30th of May. So give trans staff extra breaks to adjust underwear. This is an LGBT group within the University Hospitals Sussex NHS Trust. It says people need pauses for relief to deal with chest binders and tucking. But this has been dropped following the Supreme Court ruling. So why this came out on the Telegraph after it's been abandoned is an interesting question. And just a couple of photos I saw when I was out by myself over the weekend. This was at a train station up here in the north of England. Queer Cumbria, speak your truth. Trans joy is real and pure. So, of course, remember June is Pride Month, so we're going to see even more of this than we already do. In a pub in the northeast of England, they're talking about safe spaces. So if you feel really upset, you need to go somewhere you can be safe in a pub. And right next door to that pub, in an abandoned shop window, I took this photo, and it says, "Are you a communist? Then get organized." So, are you a communist, or are you afraid? Are you trans? What are you? I don't know, but I can see why everyone is feeling really confused right now.
Yes, maybe Full Fact can get onto each one of those mainstream news headlines and tell us whether they're true or not. We'll talk about more about this in extra, I have no doubt. Well, look, let's move on. And on Friday, I reported the Starmer regime's announcement that Environment Secretary Steve Reid has seized control of the planning process to build two major reservoirs, one of the sub-headlines and one of those scans or screenshots that Diane has just talked about. And this is the first time since the 1990s that new reservoirs have been built. So the two new reservoir projects, if you remember, one's going to be in East Anglia and the other one in Lincolnshire, have been awarded status of nationally significant, which means that the projects are so crucial that the planning process is escalated from a local level directly to the Secretary of State. So two reservoirs, and the question is, how many millions of people are there in the country? And two reservoirs is all they're coming up with at this point. But look, immigration is the least of our worries with respect to this, because of course Starmer also announced, as we reported at the time, the tech corridors within which new data centers will be built. This is the British equivalent to Operation Stargate in the United States. These are going to host racks upon racks of computers to run AI. Now, Charles has been reporting on the water and power requirements that these data centers will have. And over the weekend, Linus Tech Tips, which is a YouTube channel in the United States, released a YouTube short which gives an idea of what Charles has been talking about. Just have a look at this short clip from that short.
But of course, maybe you aren't just sitting in an apartment and instead you have 1.4 megawatts of power available to you. This is the GB300 NVL72, and it has 72 Blackwell GPUs all crammed into one. And the most impressive thing is that on the back, they're all connected together using NVLink, so all 72 of those GPUs act as one as far as your software is concerned. Pretty clearly, you are not going to be connecting this to your house. You need a lot of water cooling, a ridiculous amount of power, and even just the switches to operate a machine like this is going to be pretty freaking wild.
So you saw the size of the water cooling pipes there. That's just one rack of computers. The average AI data center could have as many as 5,000 of those racks in just one data center. So just think about that. And the question then is, what is the bottom line? The UK has an ever-growing population because of immigration, and we'll just make the point that's not irregular migration we're talking about, that's regular migration. And at exactly the same time that we're importing more and more people, we're systematically shutting down food production. We're building computer infrastructure, which will get priority for water and for energy. And it should be clear to us all that the policy here is either to reduce standards of living to such a degree that the human population will not need the food, water, and electricity, or the policy is to reduce the population, or both, because the way this is going, reducing the standards of living further is going to increase the tensions in the general population. People are going to get angrier, and immigration is going to be blamed for all of it. And I believe the intention here from the regime is to see major civil unrest in this country, which is going to enable another emergency response. I think we need to actually waken up here and recognize who the enemy is and act accordingly.
Could not agree more with you, Mike. And that was exactly the tone of what I was seeing on the street in Plymouth last week. People who were watching last Monday would have seen the report that I did at the national strike in Plymouth. There was a whole network of these across the southwest and further afield across the country in major urban centres. And it appeared to be, frankly, organised by the people supposedly counter-protesting. So this was the Stand Up for Racism crowd, heavily linked in with Unison and the TUC and those sorts of organisations. And I actually came across a flyer with some chants on it, which I read out last week. And on the back of that was the fact that there was a public meeting taking place on Tuesday. So I thought I'd go and have a little look, basically, and get a sense of what's happening on the inside of the movement. So I took a walk up to Mutley. I've got no video footage from that, unfortunately, but I went into this meeting room. It's about 15, 20 people there, similar amount online. It was a Zoom call, and it was fascinating, actually. There was a real variety of opinions in the room, ranging from some people quite reasonable, saying we shouldn't be shouting in people's faces that they're Nazis on the street, to the other extreme where they're saying they are Nazis and it's our job to shout in their face that they're Nazis, in the interest of, I quote, denying their right to speak. That's literally what they were saying in this meeting. Their job, some of these people, not all of them, were basically saying that they saw their role as being denying the right, the fascists, the Nazis, the right to speak, ultimately. I picked up some literature so you can have a little look at what we're talking about here. It's all about the far right, and then all the different flavours of far right, so the fascists and the Nazis and the extreme right. And there's quite a bit of debate and back and forth about what all of these discrete and disparate groups are. And actually, there's a lot of people who invest a lot of time and energy and intellectual firepower still passing through that. It's quite fascinating. A lot of this is about uniting against racism, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism at the same time. There's quite, again, a lot of confusion about how that fits in the context of things like Zionism and what's going on in Gaza. And, a lot of this doesn't really make too much logical sense when you get into it. They are absolutely obsessed with politics and political power. There was a lot of talk about Tommy Robinson, as you'd expect, and that's only going to increase. I mean, he's very much the kind of the bogeyman, the central figure in a lot of this, and basically keeping a lot of these people awake at night. Quite frankly, there's a lot of fear here, I think, and also a lot of real aggression. Like they detest Farage, like they really hate him, actually. He's a monster. He's a creature of the establishment. They've got him here shaking hands with fox hunters. There's a lot of sort of reverse snobbery around the fact that he went to a private school. He went to Dulwich College. And, I really dislike that kind of inverse snobbery. It's basically the same as, someone who went to Eton looking down on people who went to comprehensive school. Just doing it the other way around doesn't make it any better. People are people, ultimately. We can't really choose where we came from or what our education was. Crucially, they're really going to be hammering the racist line. We haven't heard this enough over the past 10 years. They've found some polling somewhere that says that apparently no one likes being called a racist, so we need to get everyone to believe that reform is racist, and then they won't vote for reform. So racist, racist, racist. That's all that we're going to hear over the next 6 months and beyond, but they're particularly focused on the elections next year. Obviously, in their worldview, Farage is a racist. That's despite the fact that the chairman of the party is a Muslim currently. And actually, I'll be honest with you, the most racist people and frankly, the most violent people that I've seen while I've been out on the street reporting on these protests have been from what they would call the radical left, right? So if we remember Ricky Jones, the Labour councillor fella last year who was out on the street in Walthamstow calling for his political opponents to have their throats cut. You know, that's one example. Or even just the concept of cancellation. You know, these cancel squads that have been going around ruining people's lives because they said the wrong thing online, or they've held a politically incorrect opinion. You know, it's really amazing, you know, when you get into what's driving this stuff. Was there anything to like? You know, I think there's probably some good people in the movement. They're also very much anti-nuclear, and I would have to agree with this. You know, I think that we should be de-arming. I don't think that we should be spending tens, hundreds of billions on nuclear weapons. But then when you get into the detail of who's behind this, it all links into this thing here. Yeah, so it's all climate driven. And this is one of the absolute kind of religious beliefs that they have that is going to cause all sorts of problems in terms of having sensible conversations with these people, I think.
Yes, okay. Well, we'll talk about that next as well.
Indeed.
No doubt. Okay, well, look, let's leave it with Rebels on Roundabouts. Now, this group was set up 4 years ago, and they've just celebrated their 4th anniversary party. It was on Friday in Stockport. Well, this is the home of the original Rebels on Roundabouts group, which spawned so much other activism in the UK. Now, we're going to show a short clip from their promotional video. We'll show the full thing in extra, but let's just have a look at this.
We are 4 years, pretty much to the day, since we set up in 2021. We wanted something a little bit more visible.
208 times we've done this.
Really, it's a social thing, you know. It's very therapeutic to come along, talk to like-minded people every Friday.
Well, we've developed a community, haven't we, here?
We met on the roundabout, and we're still together after
3 years.
It's barbecue in the summer months.
The mainstream is still pushing narratives. While we're doing it, it's waking other people up.
It's massively different now. They're far more receptive to it. Much wider group of people. Older people, young girls who would never ever take it in the past.
So well done to them for sticking with it every Friday for the last 4 years, and hopefully that will continue. As I say, we'll talk more about that in extra as well, but we got to leave it there for today. Thank you to Diane and Ben for being with us today, and thank you all for watching. See you in a few minutes if you're a UK column member. Otherwise, don't forget Germ Warfare tonight, interview tomorrow, and we'll be back for the news on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.